Happy Pride Month, everybody. Welcome to the OneSJI Diversity Podcast. I am your host, Tiara Neal, and I'm so excited to be able to present to you this month our podcast for June. So I know that it's Pride Month, however, it is also a time where we celebrate Juneteenth. So we have with us this month the American Association of Blacks in Energy, our AABE ERG. And with us this month, we have guests Michelle Chandler, Christina Teal, Lisa Cotman, and Mia Holly, who's going to share a little bit about their experience with Juneteenth and what it means to them, as well as a little bit of the history of AABE and how the two kind of coalesce. But let me share a little bit about what Juneteenth history actually commemorates. We celebrate Juneteenth or commemorate Juneteenth to honor June 19th in 1865, when the U.S. federal government finally reached Galveston, Texas, to enforce Lincoln's 1863 Emancipation Proclamation. Did you hear that? So 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed was actually when we commemorated the freedom of the slaves. So 250,000 black people remained enslaved for 2 years, not knowing that they were free citizens. And while the holiday has been celebrated by blacks or African American communities throughout the U.S. since its inception, it was not until last year, 2021, that Juneteenth actually became a federal holiday and either officially recognized or made a state holiday in almost all states. So at this point in time, we are celebrating June 19th to honor the freedom of black slaves in 1865, although they were freed in 1863. That's a big deal. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Michelle, Christina, Lisa, and Mia about their input on June 19th, or Juneteenth as we call it. So welcome to the OneSJI podcast, ladies. Looking forward to hearing what you have to share this month.
AABE is an acronym for American Association of Blacks in Energy. It was created by a man named Clark Watson in 1977. Mr. Watson, he was the owner of an energy consulting firm in Denver, Colorado. He wanted to ensure that minorities were included in the policy-making decisions that was attached to the energy world. He chose the name because it began with A, and he wanted to make sure that alphabetically we were always a portion of any future invites that were available. AABE is now made up of 40 chapters that span over the entire United States. Fast forward that to 2010 is when South Jersey chapter of AABE was created. The South Jersey chapter of AABE consists of approximately 40 members from various businesses. To date, we have provided over $100,000 in scholarships to 63 students. We volunteered at soup kitchens, homeless shelters. Yearly, we speak at a BEAM event, which is Black Energy Awareness, to encourage high school technology students and to educate them on the opportunities and the careers that are available in the energy world. Pretty much AABE is just concentrating on doing whatever they can, either educating or hands-on opportunities to impact the community and be that voice that everyone needs.
What a fantastic legacy for the AABE South Jersey chapter through SJI. And the history of Juneteenth is eye-opening. So let me ask each of you, what does Juneteenth mean to you? But I'll turn it over to Michelle.
Well, it's a little different. Growing up, I never knew about the holiday. I only became aware of it within the past couple of years. But now understanding what it means and how it actually impacts the community and the world, I feel burdened and saddened that it was never really taught to me or explained to me in the past. However, I feel as though going forward, we need to make sure that the future generations are not raised or blinded by the fact of what it really is and how it really impacts the world and to make a difference in it.
Thanks, Michelle. And Mia?
I feel like in the past, maybe I understood some of its history, but I never really recognized it as a holiday until recent years. And again, I think that's just because a lot of the times we're fed a false history of the Black community in the United States. So I think it's a great thing that it's not only recognized more officially throughout the United States, but we're able to understand its history more now. And to me, at this point, it's really just it's just a time for community. I know within the last couple of years, the way I've celebrated Juneteenth is whether I'm at a barbecue or I'm at a nonprofit event, supporting a Black organization or any of those things. I think it's really just a nice time to join together with community. And I think it's a great holiday to be celebrating now.
Thank you, Mia. And Christina?
Different from everyone else, my parents did a great job in instilling in us what Juneteenth was at a very young age. Growing up, when we would go on family vacations, we always had to incorporate some type of Black history fact. So we would go visit slave plantations down south or and different things like that. Just learning about Juneteenth and slavery in general. And also being a graduate of William Passion University, my undergrad minor was African American Studies. So having all of the education from my parents growing up about Juneteenth and going to different festivals. I also learned more about it in college through my undergraduate studies. So I kind of have a melting pot of information about Juneteenth, and I've been celebrating it or acknowledging it at least as long as I've remember. Really, the whole, I don't want to call it a fad, but kind of the fad of now everyone now acknowledging it based on the tragic events that have taken place over the past few years is kind of off putting to me a little bit because why weren't we more educated about this growing up? Why isn't this incorporated in textbooks or just regular history lessons throughout school? We learn about other cultures, other holidays, other religious practices. How come we don't learn about how our ancestors were treated being African American? So what Juneteenth means to me is legacy, ancestry, just different things like this we are supposed to know about, and we are just now kind of being exposed to more broad and commercially. I just wish that our culture, our community, being African American, a minority, we were exposed to things a lot younger, a lot sooner. So I will be, or I have been incorporating Juneteenth and different lessons about Black history to my children that I have an 8-year old and 3-year old. So I'm passing on all the information that I've learned from my parents to my children.
Thank you, Christina. And to add, and thank you, everybody, just some great perspectives and just how diverse our perspectives are. I wish I would have grew up knowing more about Juneteenth, but I didn't. It wasn't until the last 2 years that I learned about it. And I do make sure that it's a part of my culture now that I know. What I've done is some research on it more just because I wanted to know more about it. I also have a quote that I picked up that I thought was amazing to answer some of the thoughts that I have about Juneteenth, and it's a quote by Barack Obama. And his quote basically states that Juneteenth has never been a celebration of victory or an acceptance of the way things are. It's a celebration of the progress. It's an affirmation that despite the most painful parts of our history, change is possible. And there's still so much work to do. I am definitely agreeing with the fact that why wasn't it celebrated, but it is now. For me, what the takeaway is to ensure that I have a 9-year old, so I'm like, yes, I want to make sure that she knows about Juneteenth. And I love the fact that as an organization, we're making sure that our employees know about it because just with this little circle we're in today, I'm sure as many people who have never heard of it, and to know that there's people that have celebrated it for many, many years and passed it down to generations. But we also have people who have never heard of it. So with that, we can educate ourselves and help ourselves to learn more about it.
I think those are all great perspectives as well. And Lisa, thank you for sharing that quote. I wanted to touch on something that all of us brought up in one way or another, and that's the fact that Juneteenth really hasn't been celebrated it has been celebrated throughout our country's history, but not to the extent that it is today. And just looking at the past 2 years with protests against anti-Black racism and those really bringing the conversation around anti-racism in general to the forefront in the US. We've also seen unprecedented responses from organizations in the US, such as public condemnation of racially fueled murders, commitment and corresponding plans for how to do better, etc. And so I kind of want to ask, for you all the idea of authentic allyship and what that means to you. Because while it's important that organizations and our peers and our friends recognize Juneteenth and are here to celebrate it with us, on the other spectrum, there are organizations and people who we've seen show non-authentic allyship, which can come in any form, such as printing the words Juneteenth on a product to sell in a supermarket or simply posting an Instagram photo. So I wanted to pose the question, what does authentic allyship mean to you, and how can our peers, our coworkers, and organizations as a whole show authentic support during this holiday?
I'll be happy to take the first stab at that. I would say that self education is so important because allyship does not mean that the persons or the people that are impacted are the ones to bring people along. Because we have Google, we have YouTube, we have so many areas of where you can do your own research. I think that that's super important because in the world that we're in today, everything is at our fingertips. So everyone that would support Juneteenth should educate themselves and learn more about what it's about, and not be too quick to just make your own assumptions without doing your own research. And that's what I would say.
I'm gonna say, what does allyship look like in regards to our peers, in regards to community partners? I would say, don't be so quick just to say Happy Juneteenth. If you're an ally, if you're a community partner, if you are not, I don't want to say not of a certain community, but Juneteenth, to me, yes, we found out that we were free, but we didn't find out we were free for 2 years. So for 2 years, they were getting free labor out of us. Our ancestors should have been out forming their own lives and trying to create their way in the world, not being slaves. I don't know if anyone's seen the Walmart's getting backlash because a few days ago they were trying to put out Juneteenth ice cream. Like, you can't just slap Juneteenth on something and try to sell it and say, oh, we're in support. We're supporting the holiday. This is not that type of holiday. Being African American, we're still not free in my eyes. We are still fighting for the same rights, the same privileges, the same acceptance and respect as our ancestors, as our grandparents, as our great grandparents. My great grandmother was an indentured servant. So that's still only going back, what, 70 years, 80 years, that she was still labeled as an indentured servant. So it's kind of like, we are still fighting. It's an everyday fight in which you can't just slap a band-aid on it to say, oh, well, we gave you a holiday or we now have something to celebrate. Is it really something that we're looking at, oh yeah, we're going to run around and put up decorations and celebrate it like it's Christmas or Thanksgiving? It's a holiday that we acknowledge that we were still kind of being enslaved for 2 years. So being an ally, just please understand that.
I have to agree. I think when we think of that, we have to just think about educating other people, a way of really showing what it means, a way of doing a day of community service where we're just actually giving back and letting everybody know, like, hey, we recognize this and this is how we're going to make sure that everyone recognizes it and knows what it is.
I wanted to touch on something from MLK Day to Black History Month to Juneteenth. The fact that these holidays are centered on community work, fundraising, getting together with your community, and self-educating. I think that fact in itself just shows that there is still more work to do. There's a reason that July 4th, everyone's out on the beach, and on MLK Day, everyone is either at a university or at a nonprofit helping out their community, giving help where it's needed. So I think that's another important element of this holiday is the fact that the reason that we celebrate it in this way is because there is still more work to do. If it was just simply a celebration, then we would be celebrating, but there is more work to do within our community, and that's the way that we choose to or that's the way that some of us choose to celebrate it. But I think that's an important element to this holiday as well.